This is the single piece that taught me counterpoint. About 2 years ago, this started as basically an exercise for me to do counterpoint. I want to take two of my favorite melodies. I know it's a cliche, it's a trope to take the Confederate anthem, the Union anthem, to mix them together, but I was like, I'm going to make counterpoint on this. I'm going to teach myself counterpoint on this, and it happened, literally. So I'm going to take you through this. It has a lot of voice leading, and a lot of this big section, this big build-up, I wanted to show you. It started out as this little counterpoint exercise. It's become my, I'm trying to say this without feeling pretentious as I say it, but my fourth symphony, and it's really good. It's really, really good. This whole section right here is kind of based off of, they say there's that certain scale, it's like A minor, but it has the G sharp in it. What do they call that? Like melodic minor, natural minor. I forget what the hell they call that. But this piece is basically a mode of that scale. I'm thinking about it in terms of C major, essentially, but it has the G sharp added into that key. And then obviously we're just going to get into how we build these motives, how we modulate, how we voice lead. It's the whole real deal, really. So here, this basically starts out as a chord melody, and I want you to notice all the different voice leadings, how the voices go different places. See, this voice goes down, it also rises up, but some of these voices stay the same. I want you to notice this voice leading. But what this is, it's the Dixieland, it's the chords under that melody, but I made it minor. Like this first chord is like a C minor with a major seventh. You got like an E flat in here, mostly C minor tonality. You have an F minor. So think of that, just a C minor tonality. All right, so that's like a first little section right here. We're gonna go, so as you can see, like I said, notice the voice leading. Notice this is very stepwise on the top. The bass line is this is very similar. See, it keeps coming back to that note, keeps bouncing off of that note. Middle voices are just harmonizing, obviously. Then we start to get a little bit of momentum. We get a few inner voices getting kind of busy right here, and that's mainly just building up. It's not really melodic. This is kind of just stepwise building it up, feeling the build up over these chords, because it gets to a very kind of subtle climax. And when you see this right here, these three notes, that's a big part of the main Dixie theme. It's a big turnaround. And what really emphasizes this turnaround, descending chords, okay? Voice-led chords descending downwards, chord melody, obviously. We're embellishing on the top with these little high notes, but notice the bass line, completely chromatic, gets us into the next section. Let's see what this is. All right, so there's this big section right there. Let's go into that. So what we're doing again here, it's still kind of that chord melody thing, but it's just getting slightly more complicated. We see the voices becoming more independent, like right here. We see all this kind of counter melodic movement, and on the top, we get more melodic contour, and it makes it really jumpy, because you can see overall, it still looks like the same chord melody thing, but you can see certain voices start to take a more melodic role. These longer notes are kind of harmonizing or grounding as you see the bass, but when you see that little trajectory right there, when it starts arcing like that, and these are arcing in similar ways, this top voice and then this middle voice right here, we start building counterpoint, and it'll become less of chord melody as we go on, and it'll become more contrapuntal gradually. We have a lot of different kind of suspended chords, kind of yearning tonalities, almost kind of solemn tonalities. C major 7 sus2 right there. F minor. We're still in the C minor kind of territory before we eventually we're gonna get back to the major. E7. So see, we can be a little chromatic in there. C7. C major chord, even though this is a whole C minor passage. So we can play with the tonalities. D minor, that's a chord of C major. All right, let's carry on. It gets really cool that when it builds up. I almost hate having to like chop this up as I'm showing you every part, because the whole build itself is cool, and I might just leaving the whole build at the end. But right here, it's still mainly chord melody, but you can see the inner voices become contrapuntal. And now overall, it is chord melody, but the inner voices moving contrapuntally gives it this. It's almost kind of like a trick, because you predominantly hear the chord melody when you hear the bass and you hear the highest melodic voice, but as you get this inner voice movement, it really does start to build the momentum up. And the sound of it's a very kind of somber acceptance. I was thinking about the Civil War a lot when I wrote this piece, and it is almost like somber acceptance. I mean, it sucks your brother's probably died, but I mean, it's pretty cool. Slavery's gone. We build up to this big, I don't even know what chord that is. All that right here, that's The Truth Is Marching On. You can hear all that. That's chord melody of The Truth Is Marching On. And we build that into Oh yeah, before we get into that, let's talk about that, because here's where the counterpoint really starts to build. You can see we have that just descending piano line right here. See, look, at the top, descending piano line, obviously, but look, the bass is getting busier. The bass is having its own melodic voice, and it's rising. The logos is rising. Middle voice has its own trajectory. Look, see, all these 4 voices are independent. It doesn't mean they align in certain areas, you know. And those they align, they make chords where they need to make chords, but obviously these voices are independent, largely. And where they do coincide, it'll be different voices or coincide. Like, look, here the middle voices coincide, but here it's a middle and a bass. And we have these little waves, these melodic waves right here. These are based on the main motive. And as the bass voice is still doing its own thing. Really actually take a big look at the bass voice, because that plays really importantly with the melodic voice. And look, see here, we have this motive going up, and it starts staggered right here too. We start staggering these little by little, and we keep adding more and more. I want you to notice, I think this is going to be a G sharp. I knew it. A lot of this piece, it starts to get back into the C major-ish tonality, but we have the G sharp in there. And that's a key thing. I treat it as if it's all diatonic. I treat it as if G sharp is literally just a note of a diatonic scale. But again, I want you to notice in these top voices, now it's becoming a top 2 or 3 voices. I want you to notice the independence between the highest voice and then this voice right underneath it. You'll see they're working with each other, yet they're a little bit different. Like that right there is a little different, but you see that right there, those are kind of the same thing. Let's keep building. So that's the big build up. You see the counterpoint really lets loose. After we got through that last big section, we drop back down low. Look, all the way from this high note all the way back down here. But we start, this is really, it's the Dixie melody, but we get busy. See, this top voice is busy. The sole purpose is melodic momentum. We still have the bass doing its thing. This middle voice is just rising, really. That's all this middle voice is doing right here, rising. But listen to every single one of these notes was picked perfectly to keep this kind of stream, melodic stream flowing. Like these little descending things right here. You see it's this big downward. And look how independent all these voices are. It's almost hard for me to explain exactly what's going on. It's almost just good for you to see it, to see what these voices are doing. And see, these voices are parallel, but they're not exactly the same intervallically. And notice all this chromatic movement you can get away with right here. It's good to look for places where you can consonantly get away with chromaticism, where it makes sense. Oh, let's see, and a lot of this chromaticism keeps it pushing too. Staggered. These big chords on the top, notice how a big chord drops, big chord drops, big chord. You got to keep that pushing. But yeah, look, see, it's like those big chords are still pushing, but look, it became a different kind of motive here. Another big chord. And then it becomes the big chord again, but look, it still becomes that upward motive now, builds into the whole next thing. Meanwhile, we have that melodic stream from earlier still streaming, flying in a big wave. Middle voices still harmonizing, yet somewhat independent of each other. Bass voice, huge leaps, but it's a very melodic bass voice. And you can see it also rises. But it will descend too, but overall the trajectory of the bass is to rise. And then we get into big chords. You see these big, long super notes. And all this right here, that's where it becomes not melodic. Now that's structural. Now that's building into the next thing. And you feel it. You feel it in the harmonies. But then we build it to the truth is marching on to end it. Like, see, that's the melody. The truth is marching on, but look, it's descending, mainly huge chord melody. It's the chord melody, but now it's huge. But overall, like, purpose of showing you that is to more to show you what you can do if you have a, I know there's G sharp in there, but a diatonic focus. I acted as if I'm just going to stay in this mode I'm choosing to use, and I'm going to overlay melodies. I'm going to do it one at a time. The way I wrote that is I wrote one melody out first, one voice out first, then I wrote the next voice. I didn't write all the voices at once. I literally wrote one independent voice. I wrote the next independent voice. I didn't harmonize. I did not harmonize throughout. I did it one voice at a time. That means I might have written a melody voice for, say, 8 bars. And then, all right, I go back to the start of those 8 bars. Now I write the bass voice. Then I go back to the start of that. Then I write the middle voice. And I make sure I see which voices need to have their independence and which voices need to support. And that's a big way this comes about. And that's also a big way that you can build into these sections that are non-obvious, but yet they come across as if it's like that needed to be the next note. You know, Beethoven comes across as if he writes what needs to be the next note. And that's how I achieve this effect contrapuntally here. Because you'll see this is not necessarily Beethoven, it's not Bach. It takes from both of them. But the big key factor is being willing to use your ears. And if you're willing to use your ears, the painting you get that is that MIDI grid becomes really beautiful to look at. I love looking at that. I love analyzing this for you guys. I don't want to take up all your time with this because I'm going to get back to more of these. But expect that. This is now going to be a masterclass.